This whiskey might be worth sharing with friends. Let me tell you about Paddy Share Irish whiskey. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm the whiskey nerd, and like I said, this is Paddy Share Irish whiskey. So let me get it into the glass and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Now, what is Paddy Share? Well, first off, we're going to talk a little bit about the history behind this whiskey. So who was Paddy himself? So Paddy, or Patrick O'Flaherty, as was his real name, was one of the salesmen for Midleton Distillery a long time ago, and he would travel around to different bars kind of showing off the whiskies from Midleton to try and get people to buy their whiskey, and he would be very generous with all his samples, and he'd leave that evening telling his customers that there's a few bottles behind the bar, so next time you come in, make sure to ask for it. Now, the customers would probably have forgotten about Midleton or whatever the whiskey it was, but they'd go up to the barman and say, "Do you remember that guy Paddy? Yeah, can I have some of Paddy's whiskey?" And so over time, Midleton eventually said, let's just name one of our brands Paddy Whiskey so that the customers can get what they're asking for. Now, I've been on record saying that I think that the Paddy whiskey, as entry-level kind of bottom shelf Irish whiskies go, it's not the one I'd be reaching for first, because it's just kind of a little bit boring. It doesn't really have anything special going for it that other of those kind of bottom level Irish whiskies do. It's not my favorite whiskey, but what makes this whiskey, Paddy Share, a little bit different. So recently enough, I was at Whiskey Live Dublin and I tried this in a cocktail and actually did enjoy it, because what's happened recently is that the Sazerac company has bought the Paddy whiskey brand, adding it to their portfolio. Now, Sazerac are responsible for a lot of big bourbon and rum brands, especially some very premium ones, like for example Pappy Van Winkle. So when they bought the Paddy whiskey kind of brand from Midleton, they said that they wanted to have a premium version of the Paddy whiskey to add to their portfolio of kind of premium whiskies and bourbons. And that's what this is. It's essentially a premium or better version of the Paddy whiskey. It comes in at 47% ABV, so it does have a nice bit of weight. It's made of pot still whiskey, grain whiskey, and malt whiskey that was aged in sherry barrels, so it should have more of a kind of an interesting character coming through. And even though it's not an age statement whiskey, they do say that, you know, it has been aged for a bit longer than the standard Paddy, so it should have more kind of that oaky influence and maybe less of that youthful kind of ethanol note you do get with some of those kind of entry-level whiskies. That said though, this should be a pretty accessible brand to find. I mean, it's a supermarket brand. I was able to find this a little while ago at my local supermarket, actually at that time cheaper than a bottle of Jameson, so I definitely made it, and as you can see, I've definitely made a few cocktails with it because it is a solid little whiskey, especially if you get it on sale. So that's enough talking, let's go in for the nose on the Paddy Share. Cheers. Okay, immediately you still get that heavy kind of sweetness. So they don't say that this was aged in bourbon casks, it just says that it was blended with malt in sherry casks. So I assume there is going to be a lot of bourbon cask maturation in here, especially probably on that grain whiskey that was put into the blend, because you do get a lot of sweet vanilla right up front, right on the nose. The alcohol, the ABV, that 47% is pretty well incorporated, but at 47% you wouldn't be expecting it to be blowing the nose off you. It just helps the whiskey have a bit more presence in the glass, because once I get past that vanilla, I'm getting a little bit of spice, like kind of like a candied ginger, like kind of gingery spicy note. You know, if you get like a ginger beer or ginger ale where they've used real fresh ginger in it, still quite sweet, but you get a little bit of a spicy kind of hit of the ginger. That's kind of what I'm getting here on the nose for gingeriness. In terms of the sherry character, there's a little bit of kind of a berry note, a little bit of a dried berry, not a huge amount of dried berry, but it is there, along with maybe a little bit of nuttiness. So if you think of like kind of like a walnut or something like that, where it's a little, you know, you get the walnuts have that distinctive kind of note. If you rub them, you get that kind of flavor coming off them. That's kind of the nose I'm getting here, that kind of nuttiness coming through. Not really getting a huge amount of oak, but that might show up in the palate, so let's go in for the palate. Cheers. Okay, immediately I was struck with the fact the mouthfeel isn't very rich. It's not like honeyed, it's not syrupy, it's not thick. It's kind of light. I wouldn't say it's thin, but it is on the lighter side. So when it hit my tongue, I got a lot of the sweetness, I got a bit of spiciness, but it doesn't spread out the way like some of those richer, kind of higher ABV whiskies do. But that said, it does have a nice bit of flavor. I got immediately caramel, butterscotch, vanilla. I got a little bit of kind of oak spiciness. I didn't really get a gingery spiciness. There was a little bit of almost like a peppery spice that came through as well as it did spread out. But like I said, it didn't really spread out for long. So I'm gonna go in for a second sip and kind of look at it some more, hold on to it, chew it a little bit and see what I can find. Cheers. Okay, second sip round, held in my mouth a little bit longer. I did get some of that nuttiness coming through, but instead of being like a walnut, it was kind of like a hazelnut, like a candied hazelnut, where you get those hazelnuts like at Christmas time. They've been coated in like a little bit of like a sugar, like a brittle sugar, and baked. You get that kind of sweet roasted hazelnut flavor. That's what I was getting through on the nuttiness. Still a little bit, a light note of that sherry influence, a little bit of dried berries, really sweet, dark, concentrated berries, but not overpowering, not a huge amount of weight there. More leading into that kind of nutty characteristic you do get from some sherry finished whiskies. Again, vanilla, butterscotch in abundance, black pepper coating the tongue when I had that sip, when I let it kind of sit and set in there. And as I'm talking, I can see on the finish there's definitely some oak spice that does come through, that does kind of round out the package. So I'm gonna go in again. We're gonna focus on the finish. Cheers. Okay, so like I said, vanilla, butterscotch, pepper, all that stuff. As it fades, as you breathe, as you take that breath, that kind of oak spice, that oaky kind of influence, that character from the oak does come through. Like I said, the mouthfeel and stuff was quite thin, so it fades off pretty quickly, and then you get that oak spice. It gets that kind of oaky character coming through, and that does hang on longer than I would have expected from how like quickly the other notes do fade off. It does have a nice bit of a character, and like as I said, I tried this at Whiskey Live Dublin. They were making old fashions with it, and it does work well in an old fashioned where you get that whiskey taste, but then you also get that kind of oaky character that does kind of linger on afterwards. And I think ultimately that's where they're positioning this whiskey. They're not positioning it yet as being like a super premium whiskey. That's what Sazerac might do down the line, because they have bought a distillery in Ireland. This here was still distilled by the Middleton distillery down in Cork. So maybe when they come out with their own line of spirits they distilled in the distillery they bought in Ireland, they might have a top shelf premium whiskey. But this right here, this is probably meant to compete with the likes of Roe & Co, the likes of Teeling, where you got that kind of entry into the premium brand. It's not bottom shelf, it's not top shelf, it's that kind of mid-range whiskey where it's a solid drinker and it does work well in cocktails. Coming in at 47%, it's gonna work well in a cocktail. It delivers nice kind of rich flavors without being overpowering. And if you want to see a cocktail made with this, I have a cocktail recipe coming out on Friday, because I put out whiskey reviews on Wednesdays and I put out cocktail recipes on Friday featuring whiskey. So if you want to see that, make sure you scroll down, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, and let me know what whiskies you'd like to see me review in future. And let me know if you've tried the Paddy whiskey. I mean, like I said, it's a solid little whiskey. I think it's definitely a step up from the basic entry-level Paddy. There's quite a gap, I think, between the entry-level Paddy and the Paddy Share. I think it's a solid little drinker. If I see it on sale again, if it comes down to probably like Jameson or this, if they're about the same price, I'd say I'll probably reach for the Paddy. If I see the Paddy at cheaper than the Jameson, I'm definitely gonna be reaching for the Paddy, because it does have that extra ABV, does have that extra weight, and it does have a little bit more versatility in cocktails. But that's it for me. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Cilantro.